Certification presentation for chemical safety for 2021-2022. I am Miss Kata, in case you didn't figure that out by now. So this is your annual presentation of the hazards at school and what your rights are. So this is a OHS law, so Office of Environmental Health and Safety, that allows you to be protected from hazardous chemicals, informs your about chemical hazards around the school, and precautions, protective measures when using, handling, and contacting chemicals at the school site. So the requirements are that we have to have a written hazard communication program. So in my classroom, there is a safety data sheets for every chemical in my back room that is used by the science department. All the containers are labeled. If it's something I've made, I've labeled it with my name and the date. There's an inventory of every chemical in my back room and where it is found, how much we have of it, and what state it is in, whether it's solid, liquid, gas, or solution. The training is what is happening right now. You're required to attend this training once a year, every single year that you work at a school site, and I'm required to keep records of it. So you will need to sign off saying that you watched this video of my training in order to be verified that you are received the communication. So in 1983, this was enacted by California that you have to be informed of your rights and hazards at your work site. So it's not just for schools, this goes for any factory, any business, any office, anything has to make you aware of what the hazards are from chemicals that are being used. So why does this matter? Why do we care? So I always bring this up with my students. You never know what chemicals can do. So this was at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Massachusetts in a suburb of Boston, I believe. And the one of the employees was cleaning up in the back room of the Buffalo Wild Wings and mixed two chemicals that he wasn't supposed to mix and was trying to mop them up, and it started foaming and turned green and put out a green gas. And so he felt very sick. So he left the building, went outside, and the manager, was trying to basically like squeegee off the chemicals and get rid of it. And he got overcome by the fumes, and they called an ambulance for him. And on the way to the hospital, he died from the inhalation of fumes, because it turns out he was inhaling chlorine fumes, which are known as mustard gas in World War One, and chemical weapon basically. So if you don't use chemicals the right way, you don't know what the effects may be. I mean, someone didn't expect to die from, inhaling fumes at a Buffalo Wild Wings. And some of the customers also got sick as well and went to the hospital, but only the manager was the only one who passed away. And he was a young married husband with, I believe, 2 kids. And so pretty sad story that just didn't have to happen because chemicals were mixed incorrectly. So the employee was not trained properly on how to use the cleaning supplies. So it's called a globally harmonized system. It's a labeled the same way, where no matter where you're at in the United States. And so by these safety data sheets, it goes through each of the different safety hazards, whether you're touching it, whether you're inhaling it, what should not be mixed with it, how it should be stored. And that's communicated with every U.S. agency the same way. So these are the changes that happen in the safety data sheets. So there's 16 different formats on the safety data sheets. And yes, we will be going through all 16 different steps of the format. Lucky us. So the new dates is 12/1. All employees must be trained on the new elements of the SDS. That's what we're going through right now. The manufacturers have to identify it this way, that their safety data sheets that they put out for their chemicals have to reflect these new standards, and the enforcement starts. So all employees must update their labels and their training for their workers on these new labels for SDS. So the communication requires approval from the Office of Environmental Health and Safety for all chemical products. There's an approved list of chemicals I can use and list of chemicals that I cannot use in it. So if you remember pre-pandemic, we were not allowed to use hand sanitizers that contained alcohol. And then they changed that during the pandemic just because of what was going on. But that was, no things could contain alcohol in it. And so we're also not allowed to clean with things that have bleach in it. Those are different regulations for LUSD. And the safety data sheets are maintained on site. So if you want to look at them, there's a huge binder in my classroom with every safety data sheet. So everything is properly labeled. There's no chemical that's not labeled, and it's in its right place of storage, and I'll explain that in a second. You require the hazardous communication training, which you're having right now, your hazard training for the year. And then if there's more employees, if there's new hazards that come up, then I have to retrain you. And then we have to have documentation for this training, which you will sign for me. So the SDS sheets are the way it's main communication. So here's what's on these SDS sheets so you know how to read them. There's also a digital copy. I have a disc in the back room that also has all the SDS sheets digitally, but it's actually much quicker to go through the sheets because who has even a computer that will allow you to put in a disc anymore? None of the Apples will. So the first one is identification. It tells who's made it, what their communication is, and how it's recommended to be used, and what it does in the laboratory, and any other names it goes by. So, like sodium bicarbonate will also be listed as baking soda because that's another name that it goes by. Step two, the section two, is what are the hazards associated with this chemical? Is it flammable? Is it an oxidizer? If it's exposed to oxygen, will it burn even faster? Is it harmful if it's inhaled? And then there's a signal word of like what category it's if it's flammable, if it's an oxidizer, what that's the signal word. There's pictograms, so there's little pictures. If you don't read words, you can still see what it's going to do by like is it exploding? Is it with a fire to tell you what it is? Is poisonous, skull and crossbones. Description of any hazards that aren't classified, and if it's a mixture of more than one chemical in that container, what's the what percentage is this chemical? What percentage is the other chemical? Section three, what's the composition and information? What is the chemical name? So the technical name of the chemical, like I said, baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. The names of the symbols, anything added to it, okay, and what's the concentration of that batch? And if there's some trade secret, and then they don't have to put it if there's a trade secret. None of these things we're using have trade secrets. Four is what's the first aid. So this is probably the most important part of the SDS. What do you do if you're exposed to it? If you get it on your skin, if you get it in your eye, what do you need to do? Do you need to go in the eye wash for 20 minutes and wash it out of your eyes if it gets in your eyes? And yes, if you get something in your eyes in a chemical lab, you need to go in the eye wash for 20 minutes. That's why we have to wear our goggles every time we're using chemicals. If you get on your skin, wash off your skin for 20 minutes. Do you need to call poison control if it's something that they got inside their body, that they ingested it? And so, what are going to be the most important symptoms or effects? And is it cancer causing? Is it a long term effect or is it a short term effect? What needs to be done medically for that student or that adult if they become exposed to this chemical? If it's firefighting, if there's a fire caused by this, how do we firefight it? Not all fires are fought the same way. Some you can put water on, and some will make it worse. So a few years ago, there was a fire at a recycling plant near here, and it did not go out for like 2 to 3 days because they did not tell the firefighters when they first arrived that they had magnesium on site. And magnesium burns really, really hot and really, really white and does not produce a lot of smoke, but a little bit of smoke. But if you put water on it, it makes it worse. That just makes exacerbates the fire. So they did not know this when they came to fight it. They put water on it, and that made the fire worse. And so that's why it did not go out for several days. So different fire extinguishers are for different types of fire. Any other accidental release measures? So if it goes on clothing, skin, is there anything else that we need to know about to clean this up? If it goes in the drains or so forth, is there anything else that we need to do to stabilize it? So this is why you have an evacuation plan and you wear your PPE at all times in the lab. Goggles do not do any good on the top of your head. Your hair will grow back, your eyes will not. So how do it needs to be stored and handled properly? So obviously we do not put flammable ones next to matches into anything flammable. So anything flammable is in a special container in the back that's a flammable cabinet that's designed for that type of storage. And then I have an acid cabinet, but a separate cabinet for the bases, and they are entirely separate because acids and bases next to each other will have a not very good chemical reaction. And then everything has a section. So it's in inorganic one, two, three, four, five, whatever inorganic is, those are stored together. Inorganic one is together, inorganic two is together. But if it's a special type of acid, then that goes in a special container. The organic materials go together, the inorganic materials go together. They're all in locked cabinets, and the cabinets have little trays with them that, in case of an earthquake, they will not fall out easy in case the cabinets are not locked. So give them another little protection. If cabinets open, they're in a little tray that has more shelves that'll protect it more from falling over in case of an earthquake. So section 8 is exposure controls and personal protection. So what personal protectives do you need to make in what is proper PPE for wearing this type of things? Do you need to wear goggles? Do you need to wear a face mask? Do you need to have gloves on? Do you need to wear aprons? What do you need to, anything special that is not part of the usual protective um, clothing? Anything else, they'll tell you what you need to wear. 9, what are the chemical and physical properties of this chemical? And this is extremely important because does it have an odor? Does it evaporate very easily and go into the air? What is it soluble with? Is it soluble with water? Is it soluble with alcohol? What temperature does it light on fire? So this is really important chemical to know because like to give examples from everyday life. So at UCLA a couple years ago, there was a fire in a chemical laboratory, and the woman who was working with it was not trained properly on what that chemical does, and so she was using a large, like basically, I'm sorry, lost the word for it, like a large pipette, um, plunger pipette, and the chemical came out the back of it. And this chemical, when it's exposed to air, lights on fire. It doesn't need to be exposed to a flame, spark, nothing. Just being exposed to air lights it on fire. And she received burns over her body that were so severe that she was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And then she passed away. So her family was there to see her going through all this suffering and agony because she was not properly trained on the chemical. So UCLA got a huge fine for this, and this brought on more different types of protections for employees working with different chemicals and more training of chemicals. So accidents happen every year in science laboratories. People lose eyes, people lose arms, they lose fingers from chemical accidents, but they can be prevented of being trained properly on what those chemicals do. And of course, we don't use chemicals that are that dangerous, but there is dangers that come. There's accidents that happen at LUSD sites every year. Student was killed at a site in the valley because they were launching rockets after school, and one of the rockets went wrong, and it actually killed the student who was doing the after school activity. 2, how stable is this chemical? How reactive is this chemical? What should it not be stored by? How long will it stay stable on our shelf that we can keep it in our cabinets before we need to dispose of it properly? 11, is it toxicological information? If there's something that's more dangerous about this chemical that can cause long-term damage, how toxic it is to the human body, that's going to be explained here. And we're not using chemicals of this kind. We're not allowed to use chemicals of this kind. 12, ecological information. This is a non-mandatory. So what is going to be the problems if this gets released into the water supply, if animals are exposed to it? What's going to happen to groundwater? Okay. Ozone depletion, any kind of detrimental effects to the atmosphere or water. 13, disposal considerations are also not mandatory, but how do we dispose of things properly? Can I just wash it down the sink, or do I need to store it in a separate container and have it picked up? Um, and how it should not be disposed of in certain ways. If certain disposal, I have to, have it picked up by LAUSD downtown. I fill out a form and they pick it up. So if one of the teachers is doing dissection, there's certain ways that those are, chemicals in those cows, sheep that need to be disposed of in a certain way that LUSD has to pick up from us. We cannot throw them in the garbage. And this is the little sign we have to put on things when we have hazardous waste. How is it transported? And this is also not mandatory. Certain things cannot be transported via air. They have to be transported by a train or by a cargo truck. And so things like I get sodium. Sodium is extremely, extremely, extremely explosive, and in water, and it can be not put on an airplane. That's a law about it. Regulatory information. So, is there additional information from the federal government, Department of Transportation, the EPA, about this chemical that we need to know? Any other information? This is just anything that the previous 15 did not cover, then 16 would include any of this other information. And some of them have very long sheets, like it'll go 3 pages, very small type. So my responsibility here is that the SDS are readily accessible. It's in my back room in a big folder. It says SDSs on it. Can't miss it. It's right near the door in that binder. Everything is labeled properly from the manufacturer, and if it's not from the manufacturer, then I will make a label to explain what it is, what strength it is, and who made it, and what date I made it. Okay, and then all labels must have these things from the manufacturer. That's their responsibility. The workplace labels are what I'm creating, and I just said all those things I'll put on it. And this is a sample of what the label looks like from one of our manufacturers, our main manufacturers, Flynn Scientific Supplies as Chemicals. But this also goes for cleaning chemicals. So any cleaning chemicals need to be labeled what the product name is. So I mix my own chemicals to spray my tables down from an LUSD product, and I label my containers with what chemical it is and that I'm making it. So these are just telling you how to read the labels. These are the different diamonds you see at different buildings about how flammable it is, how reactive it is, the toxicity of it. So everyone should know how to read a pictogram. So a health hazard it's cancer causing or can cause mutations. So it's a little star inside your body. The flames are obvious that is flammable. Exclamation mark is something it's going to react with something. A gas cylinder, if we have a compressed gases, corrosion that's going to burn your skin. If it's a bomb, then that's explosive. The flame over this circle means it's an oxidizer. When oxygen comes in contact with it, the flames get more intense. Environment is not mandatory, but causing damages to the air, water. And skull and crossbone, that's very, very, very toxic. That any contact with that would cause death. Okay, so this is all your training is all the things on site. I'm not going to review all the chemicals because we have so many, but it's my room is the storage for the chemicals, and then also, of course, where the cleaning supplies are from the custodial staff. So annually you have this, and if you begin a new assignment and you came to LUSD, you'd have to be trained on it. Any newly identified hazards, okay? So this is my providing you your professional development, your any questions to see me, and you must sign the document. If this is still old school, I have a Google Doc a Google form you're going to fill out for me, but you have to sign the paper copy. So the paper copy will be at the front desk where you sign in the morning and out in the afternoon. I will put it there for you to sign it at your leisure, but please sign it by the end of the week. Okay, and so I would give a demonstration. We're doing it in person. So I have a chemical that is called, I can't remember the name of it right now. I just lost it. It's a pollen from just a tree, and they collect the pollen to use in demonstrations. And if you have it just in a pile and put a match in it, it does not burn. But if I have a flame and I spray it in a pipette, like basically it becomes a flamethrower and it will light on fire because it spreads out in the air and there's more surface area, and then the reaction rate will increase. It will burn in the pile too, but it's much more likely to burn if it's spread out in the air. So why do we care about this? Well, because happens in a sugar factory. So powdered sugar or regular sugar, if it's improperly ventilated in the factory, the whole factory can explode. This is from a Georgia explosion that happened a couple years ago. Several people died in this accident. 14 people died, injured 38 others. You can see the factory just imploded from the inside. So the inside of it, the pressure built up from all the gases that were being released, and the building exploded outwards. And if you see, they have little silos that are still intact not in the main part of the factory. If you look down the street on Slauson, if you come from east of here every morning, there is a Vaughn's, Albertsons, Safeway factory just down the street. That's their bakery site. And then they have those silos, and those silos are explosion risks if they don't ventilate them and get the dusts out properly. If any spark goes in those silos, they can cause an explosion. And so just up the street, we have a bakery that has tons and tons of sugar and flour they're using that can explode if not properly ventilated and the ventilation system is not drawing out the powder from the room, and a random spark can cause an explosion. So it's always good to know what risks in an environment like this we have around us. So thank you for paying attention. Thank you for signing the document. If you have any questions, please see me. I'm in room 5301. Have a good day.